In the vast expanse of the galaxy, there are countless planets with life, each with its own ecosystem, dangers, and secrets. But there was one mystery that had puzzled the galaxy's greatest minds for centuries: Earth. A seemingly insignificant speck in the universe, Earth was considered by many to be a backwater planet inhabited by fragile creatures. To most galactic civilizations, Earth was an afterthought, a place so unremarkable that they barely took notice of its existence. But, as it turned out, they were horribly wrong. They called it the Deathworld, a name given to planets where life was so dangerous, so hostile, that only the strongest could survive. The galaxy was full of these worlds, where creatures lived in constant battle with the environment, facing deadly predators, violent weather, and treacherous landscapes. Yet, despite their dangers, no one had ever considered Earth as one of these worlds. They had underestimated humanity's strength, endurance, and will to survive. But now, the truth was beginning to surface, and it would shatter everything the galaxy thought it knew. Earth, it turned out, was far worse than a death world. It wasn't just the raw power of its creatures or the merciless landscapes. It was something far more terrifying. Humans, despite the challenges they faced, had endured, adapted, and even thrived. But what set them apart from every other species in the galaxy was their unyielding resolve, their relentless spirit, and their ability to rise against all odds. Earth had produced not just survivors, but conquerors. As the first explorers from the Galactic Federation set foot on Earth, they were quickly overwhelmed by what they saw. The so-called primitive humans didn't just survive in an environment full of danger, they conquered it. The beasts of Earth, once considered the apex predators, were no match for humanity's ingenuity and sheer determination. The predators had nothing against the collective force of human unity and resourcefulness. And what was perhaps the most surprising to the visitors, the humans were still growing, still evolving in ways that no one could have predicted. In the face of every catastrophe, humanity had learned not just to survive, but to innovate. Their technology was primitive compared to the galactic standard, but their creativity was unmatched. Their ability to adapt and turn the most lethal situations to their advantage was something the galaxy had never seen before. Even as they faced internal struggles and turmoil, they continued to push forward. But now, the question loomed large: if Earth had been hiding such potential, what did that mean for the rest of the galaxy? Was humanity truly ready to face the galaxy's greatest powers? Or would they find themselves overwhelmed by forces they couldn't even begin to understand? The answers would come soon enough, but one thing was certain: no one in the galaxy could afford to underestimate Earth ever again. As the explorers began to understand the scope of humanity's true power, something was coming, something far worse than they could imagine, and the galaxy was about to find out just how much Earth had been holding back. For centuries, Earth had been a forgotten relic of the galaxy. Its inhabitants were seen as primitive, even barbaric, by many of the more advanced species. The idea that a planet of such simple life forms could pose a significant threat was laughable to those who'd seen the might of the Dominion, the Federation, and countless other galactic powers. Earth was just another small, insignificant world. But that assumption was about to crumble under the weight of an unimaginable truth. The first explorers who arrived on Earth were part of a high-level diplomatic mission. Their objective? To assess the planet and determine if it was worth the Federation's attention. The theory was that humans were nothing more than an interesting footnote in galactic history, an evolving species with no real power to challenge the broader order. But the moment they touched down, it became apparent that something was wrong. The humans weren't as weak as they'd been led to believe. They weren't simply surviving. They were thriving in ways no other species had before. The explorers had underestimated Earth's natural hazards as well. The planet's environment was chaotic, unpredictable, and far more dangerous than they had ever anticipated. Natural disasters, brutal climates, and aggressive wildlife formed the backdrop of humanity's evolution. But it wasn't just the elements that made Earth a constant battleground. It was the humans themselves. Their relentless drive to overcome adversity, to outsmart and outlast any danger, set them apart from every other race in the galaxy. These humans were not the meek, harmless creatures the explorers had been taught to expect. They were survivors in the truest sense of the word. They had evolved to adapt to a constantly shifting environment, one that demanded resilience and resourcefulness. Their ability to endure extreme conditions, from droughts to bitter cold, from toxic jungles to apocalyptic war zones, was unmatched. The explorers quickly realized they were facing something far more dangerous than they had imagined, a species capable of not only surviving but dominating in the most hostile conditions known to the galaxy. Still, the explorers weren't concerned at first. The Federation had conquered countless worlds far more hostile than Earth. The thought that one small planet could pose any real threat seemed absurd. But what made Earth so dangerous wasn't its raw power or its untapped potential. It was humanity's unwavering spirit. Their capacity for sheer, unyielding willpower was something no one had expected. And that, more than anything, was what made them terrifying. The Federation began to realize they had made a grave mistake. The more they observed Earth, the more they came to understand that it wasn't just the environment that had shaped humanity's strength, it was their history. The humans had been tested again and again, from the depths of ancient wars to the rise of empires and the collapse of civilizations. They had rebuilt after every tragedy, learning from their mistakes and constantly evolving. Every war, every famine, every disease, they had faced them all and come out stronger on the other side. Now, as the explorers observed them closely, they saw something even more unsettling. Humans had learned not only to survive, but to innovate in the most extreme conditions. Their technology may have seemed primitive compared to the Federation's, but it was growing at an alarming rate. What had once been crude tools were rapidly evolving into advanced machines capable of harnessing the power of the very planet itself. And these humans, with their unyielding resolve, were not content to simply exist. They were determined to conquer. The explorers tried to communicate with the humans, to make sense of what they were witnessing, but every attempt fell short. Earth was too chaotic, too unpredictable for the Federation to control. And yet, despite all of this, one question loomed over them: what were the humans hiding? Something deeper lay beneath the surface of Earth's survival story. Something ancient. Something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The explorers had seen the hints, strange artifacts buried beneath the soil, remnants of long-forgotten civilizations, and whispers of powers that had once ruled the planet. Powers that had disappeared long ago, at least. That's what the humans thought. As the explorers ventured deeper into Earth's heart, their unease grew. The truth was closer than they realized, and it was more terrifying than they could have ever prepared for. The darkness they were about to uncover would change everything. But it was already too late to turn back. The next steps would reveal a truth so horrifying that even the Federation would have to reconsider their position. But would they survive long enough to find out? And could they stop the chain of events they had unknowingly set into motion? The answer was just beyond their reach. As the Federation's explorers delved deeper into Earth's mysteries, they began to realize that their previous assumptions had been grossly incorrect. What they had assumed to be the planet's chaotic, unpredictable nature was merely the surface. Beneath the surface lay something darker, something hidden, and something far more dangerous than they could ever have imagined. Earth wasn't just a survivalist paradise. It was a ticking time bomb, ready to explode. The explorers had started with a simple mission: assess the humans, gauge their potential, and report back to the Federation. But as they ventured further into Earth's untamed regions, their mission began to take a more sinister turn. There were whispers among the team, stories of strange occurrences that couldn't be explained, of things that had been buried in the planet's history, waiting for the right moment to resurface. At first, it was easy to dismiss the oddities as folklore or the fear-driven ramblings of an isolated civilization. But with every new discovery, the feeling of dread grew stronger. The explorers stumbled upon ancient ruins, vast and imposing, buried beneath dense forests and forgotten deserts. Structures far older than humanity itself. Some of the ruins looked almost like they had been built by a civilization far more advanced than any they had encountered. Yet, these civilizations had vanished long ago, leaving only their crumbling monuments behind. What caught the explorers' attention, though, were the symbols carved into the stone, symbols that seemed to pulse with a strange, otherworldly energy. The deeper they went, the more unsettling it became. But the most unsettling discovery wasn't in the ruins, it was in the humans themselves. Despite their apparent lack of technology, there was something about their eyes, their faces, that sent a chill through the explorers. The humans were not just survivors, they were watchful, as though they knew something the explorers didn't. And some, like the one known only as the Watcher, seemed to understand the true depth of what the explorers had uncovered. His warnings were cryptic, his words laced with a knowing fear. "You are not ready," he had said, his voice low, his gaze never wavering from the depths of the ruins. The Federation's team was divided. Some were convinced that Earth's mysteries were nothing more than the superstitions of a primitive race. They believed that the ruins were just remnants of an ancient, long-dead civilization, and that humanity had simply inherited the scars of its predecessors. But others began to question everything they thought they knew. What if Earth wasn't just the product of evolution? What if the humans were the inheritors of a long-lost power, something ancient that had shaped their existence in ways no one understood? The tension within the team was palpable. Some were eager to report back to the Federation, to reveal what they had discovered, while others felt an almost visceral urge to keep their findings secret. But secrecy had its price. The deeper they explored, the more dangerous the planet became. The once innocuous wildlife became more aggressive, the storms more violent, and the land itself seemed to fight back against their presence. One by one, members of the team began to disappear. At first, it was just a few, lost in the wilderness. But then it became clear that something or someone was hunting them. As their numbers dwindled, a sense of paranoia settled over the survivors. Who or what was behind the disappearances? The humans? The planet itself? Or something far darker, something ancient that had been waiting for the explorers to uncover it? The Watcher had said it best, "You are not ready." And perhaps they never would be. But the greatest revelation was still to come. In a final attempt to unlock the truth, the explorers ventured into the heart of the largest ruin they had discovered, a massive structure that seemed to pulse with energy. It was there that they found the relic, a stone tablet etched with symbols that seemed to shift and change as they gazed upon it. The moment one of the explorers reached out to touch it, the ground trembled and the air crackled with an electric charge. It was as if the planet itself had awakened. Before they could react, a deafening roar split the sky. The ground beneath them cracked open, and something massive began to rise from the depths of the earth. The explorers froze, realizing with horror that they had stumbled upon something far worse than they could have ever anticipated, a force that had been lying dormant, waiting for centuries, perhaps millennia, to be unleashed. And now they had unwittingly triggered it. The sky darkened as the monstrous figure rose, its form monstrous and indescribable, a being born of the planet itself. The explorers scrambled to retreat, but the earth beneath them seemed to move in opposition, as if the very land had become their enemy. As the creature loomed closer, their weapons seemed useless against its immense power. The team's leader, now realizing the full extent of the danger, ordered a retreat, but there was no safe place to run. The creature was everywhere, its presence seeping into the land, the air, the very soil. As the last few survivors fled, a chilling realization hit them. Earth had been far more than just a death world. It was a world that had once been ruled by an ancient power, a power that now sought to reclaim what it had lost. And as the darkness swallowed them whole, the explorers understood this was just the beginning. The galaxy would soon learn just how much of a mistake it had made underestimating Earth. But would anyone survive to tell the tale? The world was closing in around them. As the explorers scrambled through the dense forest, their hearts raced with the same frantic rhythm that had overtaken the very land beneath their feet. The ground cracked and trembled as the massive creature, now fully risen from the depths of Earth, tore through the landscape with unrelenting fury. It moved with terrifying speed, its presence like a dark storm cloud, an unnatural force of destruction. The air seemed to grow thick with dread, and the sky above grew darker still, as if the planet itself was suffocating under the weight of something ancient, something primal. The survivors stumbled through the underbrush, each step heavier than the last, the air growing harder to breathe with every passing moment. The thunderous roar of the creature echoed through the forest, growing closer with each heartbeat. It was as if the very earth itself was hunting them, the ground itself shifting and moving with a malevolent intent. Even their advanced technology seemed to falter under the crushing weight of the planet's rage. Their weapons, designed to combat the galaxy's deadliest threats, felt like toys in the face of this unspeakable power. The team's leader, now barely able to keep his composure, shouted orders, trying to maintain some semblance of control. But his voice faltered in the face of such overwhelming terror. Every instinct told him to run, to flee, but he knew it was futile. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to escape. They had unleashed something beyond their comprehension. As they reached the edge of the forest, the team made their way toward the rocky cliffs, hoping for some kind of refuge, some way to escape the creature's wrath. But the earth didn't relent. It cracked and split as though responding to their every move, pushing them forward with relentless force. The explorers were being herded like prey to a predator that understood their every weakness. No matter where they turned, the landscape seemed to fight them, pushing them toward a singular, inevitable destination. In the distance, the remnants of the ruins flickered through the mist, the symbols on the stone still glowing faintly, as though mocking their futile attempts to escape. They had barely begun to understand what they had stumbled upon, and already it was clear Earth was more than just a hostile world. It was a world that held secrets far older and more dangerous than any they had encountered in the galaxy. Secrets that now threatened to consume them whole. One by one, the team members began to lose faith. Their fear was palpable. Their once unstoppable confidence had eroded. The leader, struggling to hold it together, felt the crushing weight of responsibility bearing down on him. His mind raced. How could they stop it? How could they fight something that seemed to have the power of the planet itself at its command? They reached the cliffs, but there was no safety in sight. The massive creature was closing in, its form now looming large against the mist, its eyes glowing like two infernos, watching their every move. It was no longer just an animal. It was something far more intelligent, something with a purpose. The ground beneath them began to quake, the earth splitting wide open in jagged cracks that seemed to come alive, pulsating with energy. The explorers backed away in horror, realizing that they had made a critical mistake. They hadn't unleashed a creature. They had awakened something much worse. The Watcher's warning echoed in the leader's mind. You are not ready. But it was too late. The truth had already been revealed. The creature wasn't a threat in and of itself. It was merely a harbinger. The true danger was far more insidious. And now, as the darkness closed in, the explorers realized they were not just fighting for their lives, they were fighting for the fate of the entire galaxy. In the distance, the otherworldly energy from the ruins began to surge. The symbols, once faint, now glowed brightly, pulsing in time with the creature's movements. It was as though the entire planet was awakening, responding to something deep beneath the surface. The explorers had triggered something ancient, something powerful, and now the planet itself was alive, aware, and hostile. The ground shook violently as the creature let out another deafening roar, the sound reverberating through the cliffs. The team's leader looked around, his mind racing. They had no way to stop this. No weapon, no technology, no plan. They were alone on a planet that had come alive to destroy them, and every passing second brought them closer to the edge. With a sense of grim realization, the leader knew there was only one choice left: to find the source of the power, the source of the ruin, and destroy it. But it was a gamble, a long shot at best. Would they even survive long enough to get there? Or would the earth swallow them whole before they had a chance to act? As the creature closed in on them, its massive form shaking the ground with every step, the team's final hope rested on one question: would they find the power to defeat it, or would Earth's ancient wrath wipe them out completely? They had no answer. Only the terrifying, all-consuming pull of the unknown. And then everything went black. The darkness was absolute. The ground beneath them continued to tremble. It was as though the world itself had frozen in place, holding its breath. The explorers stood motionless, their hearts pounding, ears straining for any sign of movement, any indication that they hadn't been swallowed by the abyss. And then, a whisper, a soft, almost inaudible voice, cut through the void. It came from all around them, but no one could pinpoint its source. The leader's skin prickled with an unnerving sensation, like being watched from every angle. The voice wasn't speaking in any language they could understand, but the tone carried an ancient weight, a presence far older than anything they had encountered. Suddenly, the darkness was pierced by a blinding flash. The explorers shielded their eyes as the intense light seemed to envelop them, distorting the very air around them. In the blink of an eye, the world around them shifted, as though the fabric of reality itself had been torn and rewoven. When the light finally receded, they found themselves standing in a completely different landscape. The rocky cliffs they had been fleeing were gone, replaced by an eerie, otherworldly vista. Towering spires of jagged stone stretched into the sky, and the sky itself seemed to swirl with unnatural colors pulsing with an energy that felt alive. This was no longer Earth, not the one they had known, anyway. This was something else entirely. The leader's mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. Had they been transported somewhere else? Had the creature done this? Or was this some kind of trap, a manipulation of the land itself, a final twist of fate from a planet that had been playing them from the start? But then, the true shock came. From the shadows of the twisted landscape, a figure emerged tall, cloaked in dark robes, its face hidden beneath a hood. It moved with purpose, as though it had been waiting for them, anticipating their arrival. The explorers instinctively reached for their weapons, but something stopped them. The air had changed. The very energy of the world around them seemed to press in on them, suffocating them with its weight. And then, as if sensing their fear, the figure spoke. "We've been waiting for you," it said, its voice low and filled with a chilling certainty. The words hit the explorers like a slap. The leader's mind spun, trying to grasp the full meaning of what had just been said. Waiting for them? How could this figure have known they were coming? What was this place? And more importantly, what did it want with them? Before anyone could react, the figure raised its hand, and the ground beneath them trembled again this time. It wasn't just the shaking of the earth. It was as if the very fabric of reality itself was being twisted, manipulated, like a puppet being pulled by unseen strings. The explorers felt themselves being pulled toward the figure, an invisible force drawing them closer, despite their every effort to resist. "Do you understand?" the figure asked, its voice growing more insistent, more powerful. "You thought you were exploring Earth's secrets, but you were only scratching the surface. You are in the place where the true power resides. You are in the heart of this world." A cold chill ran down the leader's spine. They had thought the creature, the one that had been hunting them, was the greatest threat, but now it was clear. The planet itself, the land, the ancient power beneath it, was far more dangerous. The creature had been a messenger, a sentinel, guarding the entrance to this place. The true enemy was far more insidious. It had been waiting, hidden in the shadows, for the explorers to awaken it. And now they had. The figure stepped forward, its presence growing more intense, more suffocating. "You've awakened what has slumbered for eons. Now, you must face it. You will either succumb to its will, or you will be its instrument. The choice is yours." The leader's thoughts raced. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a battle for control of something far greater, something that could shift the balance of power in the entire galaxy. They had stumbled into a game far beyond their understanding, and now they were players in it. But as the figure's hand began to glow with an otherworldly energy, and the world around them seemed to pulse with anticipation, the leader realized the terrifying truth: there was no way back. There was only forward into the heart of the unknown, where the real battle would begin. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. The explorers stood on the precipice of something much darker than they had ever imagined, and all they could do was wait for the next move. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The figure vanished into the shadows, and the land fell silent once more. But the silence didn't last. The ground began to tremble again, but this time it was different. This wasn't the trembling of a creature, or even the planet's shifting rage. It was the sound of something far more ancient and terrible waking. The power beneath the land stirred, its roots twisting, its energy reaching out like tendrils, ready to consume everything in its path. And with it came the realization Earth had been the stage for something far greater than the explorers had ever imagined. Now, they would have to face it. But the question remained, would they be able to control it, or would they be crushed beneath its power? The ground rumbled with a deep, unrelenting force, and the explorers could feel the energy beneath them building, growing stronger, more violent, more desperate. They were on the verge of being consumed by the power they had inadvertently unleashed, and there was no escape. The very land they stood on was no longer their ally. It was a living, breathing entity bent on swallowing them whole. The leader's mind raced as they tried to piece together what had just happened. They had been in this strange place for what felt like hours, though it could have been mere minutes. They could no longer be sure of time, of reality. The figure who had appeared to them earlier had vanished into the shadows, leaving behind nothing but an eerie sense of finality. It was clear now the battle wasn't just against the creature, or even the planet itself. It was a battle against an ancient, malevolent force that had been waiting, hidden for millennia. And they were its prey. But there was something more, something deeper lurking in the silence. It was as if the land itself was calling out to them, urging them to understand what they had awoken. The key wasn't just about survival. It was about taking control of this power, harnessing it, or falling prey to it. Focus, the leader snapped, pulling the team together. We need to find it. The source of this energy. That's the only way we can stop this. They weren't just being hunted now, they were being tested. The land had shifted, changed around them, forcing them to adapt and think quickly. The glowing ruins from before flickered faintly in the distance, their symbols pulsing in time with the growing tremors of the earth. It was as though they were calling out, guiding them, leading them to the heart of the power that had been awakened. With no time to lose, the team set off toward the ruins, each step echoing the thumping beat of the earth beneath them. The closer they got, the stronger the pull of the energy became. It was overwhelming, suffocating, and yet there was something undeniable about it, a sense of purpose, a pull that they could neither ignore nor resist. As they reached the entrance to the ruins, the walls seemed to come alive, the stones groaning and shifting as though they were aware of their arrival. The air was thick with an unnatural energy, and the leader could feel the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. This was it, the source of everything, the heart of the mystery, the key to understanding what they had uncovered. They entered the ruins cautiously, the light from their flashlights barely cutting through the oppressive darkness. The deeper they ventured, the more the air seemed to vibrate with power. And then, they found it an altar, set at the center of the chamber. It was massive, made of stone, but inlaid with strange markings that seemed to pulse with energy, alive with an otherworldly force. This was the source, the heart of the power they had triggered. But as they approached the altar, the leader's gut twisted with dread. Something wasn't right. The power, the energy, it felt wrong, like it was feeding off of them, growing stronger with every step they took. The team froze, the full weight of their situation crashing down on them. It wasn't just that the planet was alive. It was that the planet had always been alive, and it had always been watching them. The explorers weren't the first to stumble upon this place, and they wouldn't be the last. This was a living, breathing, ancient entity, and they had merely awoken it. But there was one thing they hadn't understood: the creature they had been running from, the one they thought was the enemy, was only the first line of defense. The true power of this world lay beneath the surface, and now it was hungry for more. As the leader stepped forward, the ground beneath their feet cracked wide open, and a deep, thunderous roar erupted from the depths. A wave of energy, dark and powerful, surged from the altar, engulfing them all. The ruins trembled as the very walls seemed to close in, the symbols on the stones flashing brighter, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the beat of their hearts. Suddenly, the leader's eyes widened in realization. The creature wasn't just a sentinel, it was a part of the planet's defense system. And now, the real battle was about to begin. But just as they prepared for what came next, a shocking twist shattered everything they thought they knew. From the shadows, the figure from earlier reappeared. But this time, there was no mistaking it. The figure had no face, no form. It was nothing more than an echo and extension of the planet itself. It had been waiting for them, watching them, not as an enemy, but as a guide. "It's not too late," the figure whispered, its voice a strange, distorted version of the one they had heard earlier. "You still have a choice. You can control this, or you can let it consume you." The leader stood frozen, torn between two choices, neither of which offered any certainty. The power was undeniable, and they could feel it pulling them in, tempting them with promises of control, of domination. But at what cost? And then, as if in response to the figure's words, the entire world began to crack open, revealing a vast and unfathomable void beneath. It was the beginning of the end, the final choice that would either save or destroy everything they had fought for. The climax was upon them, but the truth remained hidden, buried beneath layers of deception and danger. The leader looked back at the team, their faces illuminated by the eerie light of the ruins. They were no longer just explorers. They were players in a game far greater than any of them had imagined, and now, with the truth finally within reach, they had to decide how it would all end. And that choice, would they be able to control the power of this ancient world, or would it consume them entirely? The answer was still unclear. But the clock was ticking, and the stakes had never been higher. The leader's heart hammered in their chest as they stood on the edge of the void. The figure, the one who had been guiding them, was no longer an entity of mystery and shadow. It was a symbol of everything they had just discovered. The planet was alive, and the force beneath it wasn't something that could be controlled by mere will. It had always been there, waiting, watching, and now it demanded a choice. In the stillness that followed the figure's words, the weight of the decision pressed on the leader's mind. Could they harness this power? Could they take control of the ancient force and bend it to their will? Or would they become just another casualty of the Earth's insatiable hunger? Every inch of the world around them seemed to vibrate with anticipation. The ruins, once silent, now hummed with life, resonating with the power they had come to understand. The leader glanced at the team. Each of them was standing still, their eyes wide, but their expressions were resolute. The fear was there, but so was a deep understanding. They had no choice now but to act. If they allowed the force beneath the land to remain unchecked, it wouldn't just be the end of their mission, it would be the end of everything. No one would be able to stop it. This was more than a fight for survival. This was a fight for the very future of the galaxy. The leader stepped forward, their hand outstretched toward the altar. They could feel the energy coursing through them, filling them with a power they had never known. It was intoxicating. The figure's voice echoed in their mind again. Control it. But know this, there is no going back. The moment they touched the altar, the world around them exploded with light. The power surged through their body, wrapping around them like an all-encompassing force. The energy was overwhelming, but they fought against the current, determined to control it. Every fiber of their being screamed to let go, to surrender, but they held firm. They had come this far. They wouldn't fail now. The ground shook violently as the ancient power responded. It was as if the planet itself was reacting to their resistance. The ruins groaned under the strain, and the air thickened with energy. The leader's mind raced, but in that moment, clarity washed over them. The ancient force didn't want to be controlled, it wanted to be understood. They weren't meant to conquer it, they were meant to learn from it. This was not an enemy to be defeated, but a force to be respected, an ancient wisdom that could change the course of history. With a final, determined push, the leader channeled the energy into the earth itself. The power rippled outward, causing the land to tremble one last time before settling into an unnatural calm. The figure in the shadows faded, and the pulsing light of the ruins dimmed. The planet's hunger, its insatiable need for control, was quieted. The team stood in the aftermath, breathless and disoriented, but alive. The world around them was no longer a threat. The balance had been restored, not through domination, but through understanding. As they made their way out of the ruins, the weight of what had transpired began to sink in. They had come to Earth seeking answers to a galaxy-wide mystery, but in the end, they had found something far more profound. The galaxy was vast, filled with dangers and powers beyond their understanding. But it was also filled with ancient knowledge that, if used wisely, could elevate them to unimaginable heights. The leader turned to the team, their voice steady but filled with awe. "We've done it, but we've only scratched the surface." There was no turning back now. They had uncovered something monumental, something that would shape the future of humanity. And while they had defeated the immediate threat, they knew this was only the beginning of a much greater journey. The mysteries of the galaxy were vast, and humanity had only just begun to explore them. The power they had witnessed on Earth was just a small piece of a much larger puzzle. But one thing was certain: they were no longer just explorers. They were pioneers, standing on the precipice of something far greater. The universe had many secrets, and now it was their turn to uncover them.